morning, a group of 12 Alfredians traveled to northwestern Spain to walk one of the 3 official Catholic Christian pilgrimages into Santiago de Compostela. For myself and for the other travelers and pilgrims, I'd like to thank the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and Mary McGee, who supported us on the way, and also to the Provost's office, who gave us additional support. And with even more enthusiasm, I'd like to thank the 11 other pilgrims or travelers who shared the Camino or the Way with me. Thanks to these people, as part of my job, I spent a good portion of last May walking and laughing through some of the most gorgeous parts of Spain while eating my share of meat trays, drinking lots of coffee. I did travel as a pilgrim, and each of these fellow travelers enriched my pilgrimage at multiple times and in many ways, and I'm very grateful to have shared the experiences with them. 4 of the people up here are with us today. On the end, from the School of Engineering, we've got Mary Hibbert. We've Patty Lynn McLaughlin, Amelia Keyes from Chemistry, and Elizabeth Cote from the School of Art and Design. And so here they are.
There's no picture. Oh.
There we go.
Okay, so here we are as we finish our walk and stop at the monument before heading into the city and across town to the cathedral. Last Wednesday, May 23rd, 2012. Oh, no, just not last Wednesday, just last May. We Alfredians were 12 out of the average of 700 people who arrived on any particular day, and 12 of the 937 Americans who received certificates that month from the Pilgrim's office of Santiago de Compostela. 21,774 was the total number this past May.
We'll divide today's talk into 4 sections. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Camino in case people would like just to know more about the background. We're going to talk about the current state of the Camino, the experience of community on the Camino, and finally we've got one of the travel narratives, which was the point of our course. So, in honor of pilgrimage's circularity, Elizabeth Cote ended her travel narrative with a thank you that provides the start to our history section. So she writes,
I would like to thank Santiago for shipping his body to Spain after his beheading and inspiring the art I got to see and the people I got to meet on my pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela.
And she's recognized some of the key narrative points in the development of this pilgrimage. A miracle, a beheading. Right? So, there we go. Next slide.
As an overview, St. James the Greater was one of the brothers of thunder, brother to John and son of Zebedee. After a great catch with Simon Peter, he abandoned his nets to become a fisher of men. Luke 5. Okay. This was the gospel reading for this past Sunday. He was with John and Peter, fell asleep, not once but 3 times in the Garden of Gethsemane. As Jesus prayed before his arrest,
So, my joke about that is that Alfred students would never fall asleep 3 times, but here we have a saint who did.
In the Bavarium Apostolorum of the 7th century and cited by Julian of Toledo in 686, he is credited with having preached in the Hispania, as well as having seen the Virgin Mary in a pillar now venerated in the Basilica de Nuestra Señora of Zaragoza. The aforementioned Alfredian Elizabeth Cote researched this as well. Before returning to Jerusalem to be beheaded by Herod Agrippa and martyred in 44 AD,
Acts states that Herod had James, the brother of John, killed by the sword. His remains His remains were either transported from Jerusalem by his 2 disciples, Atencio y Teodoro, to be buried or floated miraculously to their final resting place.
Either way, Elizabeth appreciates it, right? However he got there. By the 7th century, hymns in Santiago's honor were compiled in the Kingdom of Asturias. Reference to the location of his sacred remains appears by the 9th century in manuscripts. A monk, Pelayo, is credited with reporting the discovery of his remains to the bishop of a town in Galicia, Iria Flavia, Teodoro. And then you've got the sort of standard shrine into church, into cathedral, a little bit of sacking by the Moors. By 1122, the first holy year of pilgrimage was declared. The Knights Templar and the Order of Cluny supported travelers with a money exchange system and a hospital albergue system in which pilgrims could stay and or receive medical attention. In the 14th and 15th centuries, the number of pilgrims declined for a variety of reasons. There was some trouble with the Black Plague, right? The general southward push of the Reconquest as they got closer and closer to the southern coast, and the general criticisms about the abuses of indulgences, like pay someone else to walk your Camino type deal. Right? The Camino has enjoyed renewed interest since the 1980s and the advent of Spanish democracy. So Elizabeth's got more about the iconography. Quickly jump.
In 1987, the Council of Europe selects El Camino Frances, the classic route crossing the Pyrenees, as first European cultural itinerary. And lots of other really fun stuff about that. The iconography of St. James varies depending on his role. That of the Pilgrim, which is on the right, in El Greco and, well, I guess both, in El Greco and Rembrandt paintings, whereas in the Moor Killer on a noble white steed. The Muslim invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 711 is the catalyst for unification of Christian reconquest, during which Santiago appeared to rally the troops of the first battle of the Reconquest, the Battle of Covadonga, won by the Asturian king Pelayo in 722.
So it'll be Amelia with the mic next.
Our reading list included a diversity of definitions of pilgrimage, including two quoted here. Pilgrimage, a journey of the soul and the body, a unique combination of inner and outer experience fusing together step by step, mile by mile, through thirst and hunger, pain and exhaustion, joyfulness and determination. And pilgrimage, a setting forth, a leave taking from the familiar, from familiarity, a trip into the unknown, both interior and exterior, a moving way from what is known into what is unknown, but longed for.
Nicole Ortega, she's a junior and she completed an intermediate Spanish last year. She decided to take the Camino course and to write everything in Spanish, so I've translated some of her things. In her travel narrative, she emphasized the second of these two definitions, and she compared her own experience to that of medieval pilgrims who may have set out in an effort to cure their or a loved one's illness. Nicole also recognized the circularity of her experience as a link to the medieval pilgrim who, having not died on the Camino, which was always a good thing, would have had to turn around and walk all the way back home on foot. For our course, Erin Patterson researched pilgrimage and the different routes of the Camino. She summarizes the routes seen in this map here. El Camino Francés, La Vía de la Plata, which comes up from the south, El Camino Inglés, which you can imagine hits more the northern coast, El Camino Primitivo, which Vicki Westacott said we could not do for this trip, and concludes that through the definitions in several different routes of the Camino de Santiago I've described, I think I've successfully proven my thesis. She had a thesis. I believe that pilgrimage is a journey of self-growth and learning rather than a destination. I believe that getting to your destination is the most important part of the pilgrimage. But since there are many different routes on the Camino de Santiago, this proves that it does not matter how you get to your destination that makes the pilgrimage. Each person's is different. How you use it to learn about yourself and grow as a person is what really makes a pilgrimage a pilgrimage. We started our pilgrimage at the beach, which seemed appropriate. It's an Atlantic beach on the northern coast of Spain, albeit, but still, Gijón in Asturias was a fine destination. Here we go. This was the beginning of our suffering on pilgrimage. May Abel journaled that Gijón was wonderful. The beach was gorgeous and set up in a very interesting way. The boardwalk was incredibly close to the shore, more so than any other beach I've been on. There are very high stone walls with steps leading down to the beach that separate the two. And his approval was shared by everyone on the trip. We also traveled to León in order to contrast the Gothic St. Mary's Cathedral de Santa Maria with the Romanesque Basilica de San Isidoro with its murals. I think León was less popular, but it did give us all a taste of paella and a taste of the flat Castile. And then from Sarria, we started our kilometers into Santiago de Compostela.
So our first stop was in Sarria. We went from Sarria to Porto Marín, part of the place of the fabulous views, tubs, and average food.
Yeah, that food wasn't great.
No. Then from Porto Marín, we went to Palas de Rey, where we stayed in kind of like a summer camp style housing, which was kind of fun.
That waiter had the tattoos.
Yep. From Palas de Rey to Arzua, there's no elevator, so we had to lug our very heavy baggage up the stairs. No hot water, but there was hot chicken dinner. From Arzua to Lavacoya, we had octopus empanada and chocolate cake.
Nicole cried when she saw the cake.
I know, she was craving chocolate cake the whole time. Lavacoya to Santiago de Compostela.
Right. Who's next? Is it me?
Yep.
Okay. All right. The majority of our walking was in Galicia, and so here we can see what marks the person as a traveler of the Camino. First and foremost, we're on foot, right? We're walking through villages, woods, farms. We're on foot for long distances with small destinations on a daily basis culminating in our arrival to the cathedral. Clothing signaled both the medieval pilgrim and we were clearly our own set. Last May, we see here the medieval pilgrim wearing the conch shells, the broad-brimmed hat, carrying the staff. Mary carried a staff, Nicole had a staff. He has the script where he might have put his either Templar money or some wine, right? Our two Alfredian travelers, we got Amelia and Patty Lynn. They've got pretty much the equivalent. It's the fleece sweatshirt, the camel pack, the walking stick, super good shoes, right? And we've got one more. So you can see how green Galicia is, and there's Nicole with her walking stick and pilgrim's outfit. Over here, most of the pilgrims wear the conch shell, even now. Did everybody get one? Did anybody choose not to get a conch shell?
Mine's in my car.
There you go. Yep. All right. Let's go. It's not moving. There we go. Okay. So, brings Patty Lynn on the current state.
Oh. The Pilgrim's office carefully tracks the number of arrivals for a certificate. Last year, among the 192,488 who arrived to its office to be recognized, there was about a 60-40 split among men and women. We did our part to balance that with our own reverse, 75-25 split. In May 2012, the under 30 crowd didn't quite make 15% of the travelers, and in general, the middle-aged people, 30 to 60 years old, are in the majority at about 60% of travelers. People complete the pilgrimage on foot, 85%, as well as by bicycle, horse, and wheelchair. Last May, when Alfred's name was included in the Pilgrim's Mass, no one registered who had completed the pilgrimage by wheelchair. One of the travel narratives observes that.
Ironically, Western health and in excess have contributed more to the rehabilitation of the Camino in modern times than has the Church. The Camino de Santiago landed in the crosshairs of a generation that was feeling weighed down by materialism, relentless technology upgrades, and a search for meaning in a complex world. What could be a better antidote than the simplicity of a pilgrimage?
And I think if you've seen the Martin Sheen film, you get a sense of that too. So the trails are blazed with the conch shell that covered Santiago and his noble white steed as he performed one of his first miracles. In Galicia, diving into the ocean and surging out to rescue a drowning man. And the walking from Sardia, in my opinion, was mostly well paved and well marked with these blazes. I think the 12 of us all agreed that the terrain was surprisingly even and that we enjoyed lovely weather the whole time. And maybe, Mary, if you want to read Aaron's rendition of the even terrain and weather. Yeah.
We then proceeded to walk the next 4 days uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill. One thing I absolutely hated on the Camino was the uphill, downhill action. With my knee injury being a mystery, there wasn't really much to do for it, so all I did was wear a brace. The most painful motion was to go uphill, then downhill. But after so many uphills, then downhills, my knee just became numb to it.
In her Spanish language travel narrative, Nicole observes that the second morning I awoke with a feeling I didn't want to have, pain, back pain. I believe I was more afraid since it had happened and it was only the second day. I did my stretches and felt the muscle. It was inflamed and swollen. Each step hurt more. I took my medicine and tried to put on a brave face while I walked down to breakfast. It was not a secret that everyone was hurting, but they were hurting in their own way. And here, I'm pretty sure Nicole didn't intend the pun, but it still worked. It didn't have to be only my fight. The hiking was hard. There were a ton of hills and not so much to look at beyond the trees that surrounded us. So that's Mary and Aaron there with the knee brace and the back. And Mary agrees, right? Mary has a...
Yeah. Okay. I said, as the day grew on my feet could feel every pebble and cobblestone beneath them. Nothing seemed to help anymore. Everything made them hurt. Not the sound of the birds or sight of two dogs playing could help when 2 hours remained still to walk. Though everything was incredible to see, my mind was set on getting to the hotel. Tired of walking and not knowing if I could make it for the next 4 days, just as it seemed nothing could be worse, it started to rain. But not a drizzle that feels good on a hot day, the kind that seems to come up from beneath in a wave, the kind where hail the size of rice pelts every part exposed to open air. The kind of rain that will fill your shoes and leave you like that when there is still so far to go. This was the type of rain that could almost break a person.
Amelia, in her journal, made a comment. So.
Coming into this trip, I honestly don't know why on earth I thought it would be easy to walk this far.
So, yep. All right. So here are some of our best blisters, right? Pat Edwards was well prepared with moleskin, and you can see from Patty Lynn's photos. Is this Mary?
Yeah.
There's Mary's blister. I think she had one of the top blisters. All right. So, lest Alfred administrators worry about my judgment in planning this trip, and in spite of the physical challenges experienced by us all, Nate writes that the travel narratives really hyped me up for the pilgrimage. I found myself becoming excited about feeling the intense emotions some of those authors were feeling and going through similar experiences to the ones they outlined in their travel narratives. You could tell from the texts that pilgrimage had been a real struggle, which is something that I look forward to. I wanted the pilgrimage to be a struggle. I wanted to break down physically and emotionally in order to feel a strong sense of accomplishment. I believe I reached that point on the 4th day of the pilgrimage, thankfully. It was that which appealed to me most about the class, the idea of struggle. I knew hiking 100 and plus kilometers was not going to be easy. It was the farthest I had ever walked in that period of time in my life. Part of me almost wishes that we had walked a longer distance. I think Mary's probably on board with that. Or forced ourselves to walk more throughout the day in order to make every day have that sense of struggle. Of course, I did not know this while I was still in the class. And then at the cathedral, Mary?
This is about the tree of Jesse. At the entrance to the cathedral, the center pillar is known as the tree of Jesse, topped with a seated figure of a medallion St. James carrying a pilgrim staff and a scroll which reads, "The Lord sent me. Pilgrims of the last 1,000 years have placed fingers of their right hand into the 5 indentations worn in the marble of this pillar."
All right. We didn't get to put our hands there. They've got it closed off. And let's jump to the community. All right, let's jump to Rahul. All right. So we're just going to watch a minute of this video to kick us off as we think about our sense of community as pilgrims. If I can get it to go. We're going to go here. Okay, so this was our last dinner, the one with Rahul, and it was memorable for the relieved or just jubilant laughter that we all shared. Elizabeth describes our first dinner as well, and so if Elizabeth could talk about where we ate inside a huge cider barrel.
Dinner in Gijón the first night was incredible. It was like a 13-person family meal, full of wine, meat, and the most incredible cheese experience I had ever had. The instructions from the man who brought the plate of cheese over were to eat each of the cheeses in a circle, starting with the mildest cheese and ending with the most flavorful. By the time we reached the oldest, bluest cheese I had ever seen or tasted, it was all we wanted to eat. Everyone tried at least a sliver with a bit of tamarind paste and some bread, and we all ate together every night after that.
All right. Let's skip the bit that Nate says. And who wants to talk about Ukulele Man?
I'm not telling the story.
Okay, so the funniest moment on this entire trip was near the end of the trip. It was the second to last day, and it is because of Ukulele Man, the picture on the left. This was one of the creepiest people that I think any of us could ever possibly meet, and he walked around playing his ukulele all the time. And we've all known to avoid him. Yeah, he would make really weird, obscene, rude comments to all of us females, and it was just very uncomfortable.
Dirty girl.
Yeah.
Story. Jeez. Okay. So, who really thinks that a man with a ukulele is going to be dirty and disgusting and rude to you? I didn't. I thought he was going to be a nice man on the pilgrimage, you know, doing his own thing, whatever. So we're talking, and he's telling us about his life, whatever, and he looks at me and goes, "Have you seen any boys on this trip?" And I go, "Well, yes, I've seen some people of the male gender." And he goes, "Lots of young ones, no?" And I go, "Well, I guess so, yeah, you know, there's other people my age." And he goes, "Oh, you like the boys, you dirty girl." And I was like, I didn't even bring it on. So anyway, that was our first experience with Ukulele Man, and from then on it was like an inside joke about him.
But we all knew about him, and on the second to last day, me and Kerry and Mary were walking together, and we were all exhausted. Mary has a nice, slow, steady pace that she kept up the entire trip. She was very consistent. And I was not. And Kerry and I were in front, and Mary kind of like behind us a little bit, and then all of a sudden, Mary, who has not gone fast this entire trip, comes barreling out of nowhere. It was
so fast.
Look, like this terrified, like, "Oh my God!" look on her face, and she just is screaming, "Ukulele Man!" and doesn't even stop for us, but just runs past us and keeps going. It was priceless. It was pretty priceless.
All right, so let's just talk about Gerald, and then skip the rest. Go over to where. Mary, do you talk about Gerald?
So Gerald was a physics major from Germany, and he had hurt his knee. He's the one standing in between me and Amelia. And he walked with us for probably, like 10 miles? Was that like the third day, maybe? Fourth day? So the first half of the fourth day, which is probably one of the longer ones, because by that point, everything's exhausted. And so we talked to him about everything, life, physics, futures. It was a pretty good, deep conversation we had with Gerald. And then we saw him the last day when we actually got to the cathedral, so that was pretty cool.
All right. We're at 12:38, so let's get this thing to progress to, oh, yeah, here. Patty Lynn, do you want to talk about this photo?
Sure.
Yeah, you're highlighted.
So, our greatest sense of shared experience came inside the Pilgrim's office, which is pictured here, when the other 10 Alfredians, myself included, made sure that Mary was our first Pilgrim to register, even though she was the last to complete the trip.
All right. And then the 6 4-credit students all wrote a travel narrative, and instead of sampling random sections of travel narratives, Amelia kindly agreed to read us her piece. And so here she goes.
I'll try not to read too fast. Okay. What a great way to have spent spring break of high school junior year, touring Italy. Yes. My essay goes over time, so bear with me. Okay. We finally made it to our terminal with 2 hours to spare before we were set to board our plane. Taking advantage of this time, Chelsea and I decided to find the booth where we could receive our tax refunds. Unlike the United States, taxes are included in the price tag. What you see is what you get. If you are not an Italian citizen and spend over 40 euros, you can receive your tax refund in the airport. This was our goal. We took the tram back to the beginning of the airport where the map indicated the location of the booth. With ease, we found it, got our refunds, and set out to retrace our steps back to the terminal. Yet, to our dismay, we were not allowed back on the tram. As it turned out, we had initially taken the tram backwards. Apparently, the guard was not paying close enough attention to his job. We were instructed to go back to the beginning of the airport, all the way back through the security checks. Slightly uneasy about this, without tickets or passports in hand, we made our way back to security. I did not know Italian, but I did know that the waiting screen read 2 hours and 45 minutes until we would get through. Our plane was scheduled to take off in 1 hour. I started to panic. We were stuck in a foreign country, did not know the language, and did not know what to do. Our plane was going to take off without us. Waiting in line, I looked at Chelsea and started to bawl uncontrollably. I simply did not know what to do. All I could think of was that I was lost, had no money, and did not understand a word of what was being spoken around me, yet alone have another way to get home. I was doomed. A few seconds after I broke down, Chelsea followed. We must have looked pretty pathetic because the woman in line behind us tried to calm us down. Of course, she was speaking Italian, and I felt hopeless. As I started to panic more, she said, "Oh, you are American," in English. She calmly suggested that we go to the security guards at the front of the line. I felt like an idiot. Why did I not think of that? Trying to collect ourselves, we made our way up to the guard and tried to explain our situation in very rapid, panicked English. He said, "No parlo inglés," and shooed us away. I panicked more. Chelsea and I were bawling again. I do not know if the guard felt sorry for us or if he just wanted the crying Americans to go away. He let us through. A few minutes after, we returned to our terminal with stuffy noses and red eyes. During the 11-hour plane ride back to the United States, I had a lot of time to think about what happened in the airport. If it were not for the Italian woman, chances are that I would have not made it home that day. Sheer panic definitely prevents one from thinking clearly. The way that woman handled the situation was almost comical. I admired how she was able to stay calm and communicate with us in our own language. I hope that one day I will be able to speak to someone in their own language who feels lost and hopeless as I did in that moment. While standing in Powell, waiting for Jeff to finish getting his mail, I read every sign in sight, as always. Today there was a new one, El Camino de Santiago, a 10-day trip to Spain, 5 days of which involved hiking the ancient pilgrimage itself. Without much more thought, I knew I wanted to go. After a few phone calls, a discussion with my Spanish professor who was leading the trip, and smooth talking to my dad, I was in. I was going to Spain. This would be the perfect opportunity for me to apply my 4 successful semesters of Spanish. I would be able to communicate with people in a different language and in a different country than my own. I would finally have the opportunity to pay back the kind deed of the Italian woman forward. While in Spain, I had the opportunity to interact with others in Spanish, most of which I took advantage of. Though I was nervous at first, it seemed to come naturally when I relaxed. It turned out to be quite enjoyable and rewarding to know that all of my hard work in the classroom paid off. Throughout the duration of the trip, I spoke to and got to know many people. However, my interactions were for my own pleasure and not for the benefit of others. On the 4th day of hiking the Camino, I was miserable and extraordinarily frustrated because I had injured my knee the afternoon before. I could not imagine having to walk, well, to limp, on it for another 20 miles. I ended up gimping very slowly while wearing a knee brace, which turned out to be a big conversation starter. While walking that day, I met a German man named Gerald, who is my age, who I talked with and walked for about 3 hours. He was a very outgoing social guy, much more so than my shy self. Because of this, he got to know a number of other pilgrims walking the stretch of the Camino. It seemed like every 5 minutes he would interrupt our conversation to say hello to another person he had met the days prior. One man in particular, who we had passed a number of times as he stopped for more smoking breaks than any man ever should, Gerald expressed a strong concern for. The day previous, he watched as this man put down his backpack near a bus to utilize the restroom. While he was gone, another man picked it up, put it on the bus, and drove away. When Gerald went to ask the man if that was his friend who did this, it was clear that the man had no idea what he was saying. He only spoke Spanish. After Gerald's continuous, good-hearted attempts to communicate with him, they both were thoroughly annoyed by their language barrier. I decided to step in. I became the translator. ¿Fue la persona que tomó su maleta en el autobús un amigo? The question was simple enough, though I was unsure if I conjugated tomar correctly. Either way, the man understood and went on to explain that his bag was mistakenly put on the bus by the driver, and that it took him forever to track it down and get it back. After I explained this to Gerald, he expressed his condolences, and then we proceeded on our walk. I did it. I reached my goal in coming to Spain to pay it forward. I did what the Italian woman had in the airport. I had my moment. Or so I thought. Exhausted from the past 10 days, I was ready to get into an 11-hour plane ride from Madrid back to New York. I had accomplished all of my goals, I met some amazing people, and now I was ready to take a break. I requested a window seat on the plane as usual, so I could do nothing but close my eyes, take a few deep breaths, and sleep. When the passenger assigned to the seat next to me boarded, I was oddly relieved that she was my age and can only speak French. Finally, I would not feel the pressure from myself to try and be outgoing and have a few hours long conversation. All I had to do was smile, then fall into a deep, deep sleep, which after this trip, I did with ease. When we neared JFK, the flight attendant handed out a form every passenger on the plane had to sign for customs. I am grateful that our country has such strict rules when it comes to entry, but this paperwork really is a pain in the butt. I took my sheet from the flight attendant, read it over carefully, and filled it out. Of course I'm bringing stuff back from Spain, but what does it really matter? A few scarves, a jacket, sunglasses, coffee cups, and some bars of chocolate should be a little concern to border control. I decided they did not need to know about these things, as it would be a waste of my pen ink. What they don't know won't hurt them, right? It's not as if my chocolate bars were weapons of mass destruction after all. Having finished making this last mark on my ridiculous little piece of paper, I looked up to see the French girl expressing frustration and hopelessness. She had to fill out a piece of paper and had no idea why, let alone how. She gave me a desperate look that pleaded for help. I felt sorry for her parents or future husband because she had the puppy dog look down perfectly. Hesitating, not really knowing what to do, I tried to help. How on earth was I supposed to be able to help her fill out a form if I could not vocally communicate with her? This was going to be hard. It took about half an hour to fill out the entire sheet, starting with the name. I pulled out my passport and gestured for her to do the same. She did. It was a start. I pointed to her first name on the passport, then to the line she needed to write it on. Thankfully, she understood. All of the other information that could be located on her passport we found and filled out in the same manner. Trying to bypass the middle name was a challenge, though. Coming from a country where middle names are non-existent, the concept was confusing for her. After trying to explain using my parents' passport, I just crossed out that section and moved on. The rest of the sheet was a bit more challenging. I had established that she was coming from France, so we could fill out those portions. I could not go through all of her things, so I had no really way of explaining how to fill out the checkboxes on the form of whether or not she had fruit, meat, or nuts. I tried to use the menu in the back of the seat to point things out, but that was of little help. Though it may have not been the best thing to do, I just had her check no to all. I figured if something came up, there would be someone on the international side of customs who would be able to speak to her in French and sort things out. A few other portions of the paper I treated in the same manner. When it was time for the signature, she understood quickly. She dated it, and then we were finally finished. The paper was complete. We both let out a big breath of air, looked at each other, and then she smiled. It was a genuine smile that was accompanied by a genuine, and in English, thank you. Hearing those words come from her after all I had done felt amazing. I had helped her, and she appreciated it. This was my moment. It was not in Spanish, English, or even any verbal language. It was in the most primitive language, the first language that every human being learns, the visual language of pointing and pictures. In this moment, I was the person willing to step forward and help. I was the person who helped in a situation that caused concern and distress. I was the person who shared a common language. I was the Italian woman.
And so that leaves us with time for questions. I'll just point out that 2021 is the next holy year. If anyone wants to start stocking up on their moleskin or make reservations, that would be a big year for the pilgrimage. So, any questions for